"How much for a kidney?" the little girl asked. Everyone thought it was a cruel joke, until she pulled out a drawing of a heart and a hospital bill. She wasn't begging for food, she was trying to save her mommy. But when a millionaire overheard her offer, he didn't walk away. He knelt beside her and asked, "Who told you you had to break yourself to fix the world?" What happened next unraveled a story of lost love, hidden truths, and a child who was never supposed to suffer, because she was never supposed to be alone. Stay to the end, because her sacrifice will make even the strongest hearts break. The rain had no mercy that day, pouring down like sorrow from a sky that seemed to grieve with her. Puddles formed around her worn shoes, soaking through the soles, but she didn't move an inch. Her tiny hands gripped a crumpled cardboard sign, its corners drooping with water, but the words, "Please purchase my kidney, mommy's sick," remained painfully clear. People walked by quickly, umbrellas tilted away from her as if her sadness might stain them. She didn't chase anyone, she didn't call out. Her small chest rose and fell with quiet sobs, and the pink of her sharp blue frock darkened with every raindrop. Her golden curls clung to her cheeks, plastered there by rain and tears. A soft whimper escaped her lips as she clutched a damp, stitched bunny in one arm, the only warmth she had left. One man glanced and looked away. A woman crossed the street. A child stared but was pulled along by a hurried mother. Calla blinked through the blur, her throat burning from silence. She believed someone would stop. Someone had to. Mommy needed her. That's what the doctor said. Without the surgery, it's only a matter of time. She'd asked every adult she passed, but they either frowned or ignored her. So she made a choice no child should ever make. Sell her kidney, save her mother. Her legs trembled from cold and fear, but her heart stood stronger than ever. And just when her small hands began to lose grip of the soaked sign, a long shadow moved toward her. At first she was afraid it would be another glance, another silence. But this one stopped. His shoes were polished but now wet. His coat hung like charcoal armor. He didn't speak right away. He just knelt slowly, his presence calm like a whispered prayer. His blue eyes met hers, icy, quiet, full of questions and something else. Sorrow. "Where's your mother?" he asked, his voice as soft as the falling rain. Calla blinked. "Ha, dear. In the hospital," she said. "They won't help her unless I pay." He said nothing, only watched her, watched the way her lips trembled but her eyes stayed steady. "I tried to sell my toys. No one wanted them," she added, her voice barely above the storm. "I even tried to clean windows, but they yelled at me." She sniffled, rubbing her nose with the edge of her sleeve. "So I thought, maybe someone needs a kidney. I got two." Her innocence clashed so violently with her sacrifice, it shattered something deep inside him. He looked at her sign, then back at her. "You want to give part of yourself to save her?" he asked gently. She nodded. "She's all I have. If she goes, I'll be alone forever." Her words didn't beg. They simply told a truth so heavy it bent the air around them. "What's your name, little one?" he asked, barely whispering, like speaking louder would break her. "Calla," she said, wiping tears that kept coming no matter how hard she tried to stop them. "Mommy calls me her sunshine, but the sun's hiding today." His eyes softened, a tremble catching his breath. He looked at the cardboard again, then at her skinny fingers, reddened from the cold. She didn't look away, she didn't blink. She just stood there, 6 years old, shivering, and ready to sell her life for love. Behind her, traffic kept moving, people kept walking, but for that single, suspended moment in time, the city vanished. There was only Calla, her sign, and the man who had finally stopped. His fingers reached forward, brushing the wet edge of her sign. He didn't tear it, he didn't take it, he simply held it gently, as if touching it meant understanding her pain. "Do you know what kidneys do?" he asked softly. Calla shook her head. "No, but Mommy's liver is broken, and it costs a lot to fix, so I figured, I can help if I give something too." His throat tightened. He wanted to speak, but words failed. He stared at this little warrior, who stood beneath a bruised sky offering pieces of herself for the woman who raised her. "You shouldn't be here alone," he finally said, almost scolding himself, not her. I've always been with Mommy. Always. I don't like being without her. Her voice cracked like glass. The nurse said if I don't get the money she won't wake up. That's when his chest ached the deepest. He reached into his coat, pulled out a silk handkerchief and offered it, but she just looked at it. I'll get it wet too, she said. Everything gets wet today. He laughed once, low, broken. Then, he took off his own coat and wrapped it around her. She flinched at first, then slowly allowed it. Is it okay? She asked, looking down at how huge it looked on her. It's more than okay, he whispered. It suits you. A breeze kicked up, and she leaned toward him without thinking. He didn't move away. He simply let her rest her weight for a moment. The sign fluttered in her grip. He took it gently, then folded it, holding it to his chest. No one's buying anything today, he said, standing slowly with her in his arms. But someone's giving. What do you mean? She asked. He looked into her eyes. It means, you don't need to lose anything today, not even a single part of you. Kala didn't understand all his words, but she heard the one thing she hadn't heard in days. A promise. She buried her face against his shirt, the scent of warmth replacing the smell of rye. In he walked slowly, not caring that he was soaked, not caring about stairs. All he cared about was the girl who dared to sacrifice her childhood, to keep her mother alive. Ellis held the folded sign in one hand and the child in the other as they reached the shelter of a closed cafe awning. The rain still whispered around them, but the storm between them now carried a silence far louder. Kala sat gently on a bench, her legs dangling, barely reaching the edge. Her soaked bunny was in her lap, her eyes fixed on the puddles like they were portals to a world she couldn't reach. Ellis crouched beside her, brushing the wet hair from her temple without touching her too long, afraid it might feel too much like a goodbye. No one else can help? He asked again, his voice low but shaken. She didn't look at him. She only has me, she said softly. Mommy says I'm her miracle and her medicine. Her words were too wise, too weary for 6 years of life. She reached into the damp edge of her sock and pulled out a folded slip of paper, creased, fragile, and nearly dissolving from water. They said it's urgent, she said, handing it to him like it was a secret she didn't want to keep. Ellis unfolded it slowly, careful not to tear it, and there it was in red ink. Emergency liver transplant estimate. $20,000. The number stared at him, but it was her face that broke him. That's why I tried to sell my kidney. It felt like the only thing I could do, she murmured. He folded the paper back, not knowing where to place such a burden. What about your father? He asked gently. She looked down, her lashes heavy with water and grief. Mommy doesn't talk about him, just says he's like the wind. Used to be warm, now he's gone. The answer stung more than it should have. Ellis didn't speak right away. He only stared at the small hands cradling the wet bunny, hands that should have held crayons or being Earth-Day balloons, not desperation. He took off his coat again and offered it, carefully draping it over her shoulders this time. She flinched at first but allowed it. Thank you, she said, eyes flicking to his. But I can't stay warm long. If I do, I might stop trying. I don't want her to go to heaven yet. That sentence fell like a thunderclap in his chest. The fear of losing her mother was so deeply stitched into her, she couldn't afford to rest. He sat beside her in silence, watching the raindrops trail down her cheeks like they belonged there. Do you believe in heaven? He asked gently. She nodded. But I want her here. I don't know how to pray right. I just talk to the sky and hope it listens. She looked up. Do you pray? He hesitated. Not in a long time. Then maybe you should, she whispered. You're bigger, so maybe it'll hear you first. Ellis pressed the hospital paper against his knee, feeling the ink bleed into his pants. The name at the top, Riverstone Memorial, made his stomach churn. He hadn't walked through those doors in nearly 7 years. It was the place he once visited often, when love still felt real and life hadn't fractured. He stared out at the street, unable to speak. Are you scared? She asked suddenly. Of what? Of seeing someone hurt, or maybe seeing someone you used to love and they don't remember you. Her words sliced open old silence. He glanced at her. Why do you ask that? She shrugged. Mommy dreams a lot. She calls out names. Sometimes I think she remembers people she won't say out loud. Ellis clenched the coat tighter around her. You don't have to do this alone, he said. But I am alone, she replied honestly, until someone decides I'm not. He didn't know how to answer that. He just sat, shoulder brushing hers, his thoughts louder than the city. Do you know what hospital room she's in? He asked. 208, she whispered. I always say it like a prayer, 208. It's the only place she breathes now. Her voice cracked. Sometimes I think, maybe if I was richer she wouldn't buy samples. Is sick. Ellis leaned forward. Your mother's sickness is not your fault. She didn't reply. She just watched the sky again. I wonder if she knows I'm trying. If she can hear me when I tell her I'll fix everything. He swallowed hard. She knows. Mothers always do. Calla shifted her bunny, then reached into the pocket of the coat he gave her and found something, an embroidered handkerchief, folded with a silver thread. She ran her fingers over the stitching. Is this yours? It was my mother's, he said. She used to say it was for real tears, not just rain. Calla nodded and tucked it gently into her frock. Then I'll save it for when she wakes up. Ellis looked at her, stunned by the dignity she carried in her tiny frame. He rose slowly. Let's go see your mom, he said. Really? She asked, standing too fast, almost slipping. He caught her by the arm, steadying her. Really? They began walking toward the hospital. Every step felt heavier than the last. Ellis wasn't just walking into a building, he was walking into a memory he'd tried to bury. But next to him, this little girl marched forward with fire in her chest and faith in her step. Do you think, when we get there, someone will help us? She asked quietly. Yes, he replied. Someone already is. Ellis stood frozen in the hospital parking lot, his eyes tracing the faded hospital sign as memories clawed their way back. But Calla's tiny fingers tugging at his own pulled him into the present. Her hand was cold, damp, but it clung to him with all the strength of a desperate heart. She glanced up with fragile hope lingering in her gaze. Where are we going? She whispered, her voice nearly lost in the wind. Ellis knelt down so their eyes were level, brushing soaked strands of golden hair from her forehead. We're going to save your mother, he said quietly, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. Her eyes widened. You're really buying my kidney? She asked, unsure if this stranger could be trusted or just another dream that would vanish. Ellis forced a soft smile, one laced with sorrow. Yes, he replied. But first, we need to warm you up and get you something to eat. She looked hesitant, but her stomach betrayed her with a faint growl. Inside the hospital lobby, warmth wrapped around them like a soft blanket. The nurses paused mid-step when they saw Calla, dripping wet, pale as snow, holding a man's hand like she'd known him forever. Ellis spoke firmly to the receptionist, showing the hospital bill from Calla's sock. Get her mother's doctor, now! Calla shivered against his leg, eyes darting around the sterile room. She didn't notice the way Ellis's jaw clenched when the nurse whispered the mother's name. After a few minutes, they ushered Calla to a small waiting area. A nurse handed her a warm drink, but Calla kept glancing at Ellis with a determined frown. When do they take my kidney? She asked again, her tiny voice shaking. Ellis crouched down and took both of her hands in his. Sweetheart, he said softly, I'm not taking anything from you. Her brow furrowed, lips parting. But, you said. Ellis reached up and gently wiped a trail of rainwater, or maybe tears, from her cheek. Sometimes, he said, voice trembling. Adults lie, but only to tell the truth better. She blinked slowly, trying to understand, as a tear slid from her chin. You lied, but not bad, she asked. I lied to stop you from hurting yourself, he answered. And now, I'll do everything to heal your mom. Calla leaned forward and hugged him tightly, her tiny arms barely wrapping around his neck, but it was enough to crack the shell around his heart. She buried her face into his shoulder. You smell like soap and clouds, she mumbled. He chuckled softly and his eyes glistened. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever told me. A nurse walked over, whispering that Cala's mother was stable, but unconscious. Ellis nodded. Can I see her? Cala asked, voice small. Ellis looked at the new Shim. Please. They led them through sterile hallways until they reached the ICU. Machines beeped rhythmically. Her mother lay still, her face pale, lips barely moving. Cala's fingers clutched Ellis's hand tighter as they stepped in. She ran to the bed and gently placed her cheek against her mom's. I brought someone, she whispered. Someone who didn't leave. Ellis stood at the foot of the bed, watching a woman he didn't know, but who now somehow felt part of his story. The nurse explained her condition, and Ellis didn't flinch at the costs or procedures. I'll cover it all, he said firmly. Cala turned toward him, surprised. But, that's so much money. Ellis knelt again, this time his voice cracking. No amount is too much to keep a mother and daughter together. She stared into his eyes, searching for a catch, a loophole, but all she found was truth. Minutes later, a doctor entered with charts. Ellis signed what needed to be signed. Cala watched silently, wide-eyed. You're really doing this? She whispered. Even though I have nothing to give back? He touched her chin gently, lifting it. You gave me something already, he said. You reminded me what love looks like. She tilted her head. Mommy says love is warm and brave, like soup on a cold day. Ellis laughed, the sound foreign but healing. Your mommy is a wise woman. The nurses brought Cala a change of clothes, soft pink pajamas that finally let her tiny shoulders relax. She sat next to her mother's bed, reading from a wrinkled fairy tale book. Ellis watched from the corner, amazed at her resilience. Eventually Cala turned to him and asked, Did you lose someone too? Is that why you were so quiet? He nodded. A long time ago, I forgot how to be brave, until I saw you. She walked over, reached into her pocket, and pulled out a string bracelet. It's all I have, she said, offering it. But if you wear it, maybe you won't forget again. Ellis took it like it was gold. Thank you, Cala. She nodded. Now you're my hero. He swallowed the lump in his throat. For once, money meant nothing. The tiny girl in the rain had given him everything. Cala's little arms were still wrapped around Ellis when the nurse approached, her face cautious, her tone gentle. Sir, you said you knew the woman in room 208? Ellis released Cala slowly, the warmth of her hug clinging to his chest like an imprint of something sacred, then nodded, though his throat barely allowed it. They walked in silence down a hallway that smelled of antiseptic and despair, the kind only a hospital's dim corridors could carry. When they reached the room, the door creaked open with a weight heavier than sound, and there, on the narrow bed with IV lines snaking like sorrow into her arms, lay Celine. Her hair, once like wildfire in the wind, now limp and lifeless against the white pillow. Her cheekbones still high, but her skin pale, translucent like snow under moonlight. Machines hummed around her, flashing numbers that meant more to doctors than to Ellis, who was already drowning in memories. Cala waited outside, obediently sipping warm soup a nurse had handed her, watching through the crack of the door with wide, hopeful eyes. Ellis stepped closer, unable to speak, the sight of Celine like a ghost walking back into his life without warning or mercy. The nurse whispered. She collapsed outside a church, malnourished, dehydrated, alone. The child brought her here herself, holding her up like a little soldier. His hand gripped the doorframe to steady himself, and in a low voice that cracked, he asked, Did she say her name? Celine Willow, the nurse confirmed softly, and just like that, his world shifted. That name was once his everything, once spoken with laughter under stars, once cried out in arguments, once whispered in moments of love too deep to name. He had searched for her when she disappeared, hiring investigators, filing missing person reports, leaving endless voicemails she never returned. The trail had gone cold, and so had a part of him. And now she was here, inches away, but worlds apart. Did she ever mention a man named Ellis Thorne? He asked, the words fragile, like old paper. The nurse's pause felt eternal before she nodded slowly. Every day, she whispered. In her sleep, in her waking confusion. Said he was the man who loved her once. Said he didn't know about the little girl. Ellis's chest tightened. 1,000 questions bloomed at once. How could Celine hide a daughter from him? Why did she vanish? Why now, after all this time, was fate bringing him face to face with two halves of a heart he never knew he was missing? He stepped closer, noticing the small photograph taped beside her heart monitor, a faded picture of a younger Celine, holding a baby bundled in pink. Calla, his daughter, their daughter. His knees gave slightly, but he caught himself. The nurse gently touched his shoulder, sensing the quake beneath his calm. She has no insurance, she said delicately. We've been treating her under emergency care, but the transplant list doesn't wait forever. Ellis blinked back a wave of emotion, swallowed his own storm. I'll cover everything, he said. Every test, every surgery, every breath she needs to keep taking. The nurse, surprised, nodded with teary gratitude. Ellis looked at Celine again, her chest rising slowly, the monitors reflecting life but also fragility. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead like he had so many years ago. She flinched slightly, then calmed. Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. I'm here now, he whispered, not sure if she could hear. I should have been here always. He turned to the nurse. Don't tell the little girl yet, she's been through enough today. Outside, Calla pressed her face to the glass, waiting, still holding Ellis's coat draped around her shoulders like a promise. She didn't know the man standing beside her mother was the father she never knew she had, but something in her small heart already did, something in her eyes, when she looked at Ellis again, held a reflection that matched his own, a truth not yet spoken, but aching to be. Ellis stepped out and gently knelt beside her. She's going to need rest, he said. Calla nodded. She'll be okay? He looked into her eyes, eyes that mirrored his. Yes, I promise you that now. And as thunder cracked beyond the hospital walls, Calla leaned into his chest again, not because she was tired, but because for the first time, she didn't feel alone, not in the rain, not in the world, not anymore. The nurse placed a small floral-patterned purse in his hands, old, faded, the zipper rusted at the edges. Ellis held it like it might dissolve beneath his touch. He hadn't held anything of hers in nearly a decade, not since she disappeared. He opened the clasp slowly, heart pounding like a child about to uncover forbidden truth. Inside were carefully folded pieces of time, aged envelopes, each with handwriting he recognized immediately. Slanted, graceful, unshakably hers. The first was dated 7 years ago, the ink slightly smudged. He opened it gently. My darling Ellis, it began, and his throat locked. I don't know if you'll ever see this, it continued, but I had to write it anyway. His fingers gripped the edges of the page. He could see the hesitation in the penstrokes, like love trying to remember how to speak. They told me lies about you. I believed some, not all. But what mattered most was this. I still loved you. The room spun quietly as he opened the next letter, Calla's first birthday. She has your eyes, Ellis. I named her Calla, like the lilies we used to admire in that old garden by your office. His hand moved to his chest instinctively. That garden had been torn down years ago. She giggled today. It reminded me of you when you used to talk in your sleep. The next envelope trembled in his hand, Calla's second birthday. She asked where her daddy was. I told her he was the stars. I hope that wasn't cruel. Tears spilled down his cheeks, heavy and slow. Every unopened letter felt like a year stolen from him, a life he was supposed to live. She made me a mud pie, one said, and called it dinner. You'd have eaten it just to make her smile. He laughed brokenly, the kind of laugh that came from too much sorrow pressing on one heart. He kept reading. 6 more letters, one after another. She sings in her sleep, Celine wrote in one. Sometimes, I swear it's a song I've never taught her. Maybe you whispered it before you left. Ellis looked up at Celine lying unconscious, breathing like someone too tired to stay, but too loved to leave. He imagined her writing those letters late at night while Calla slept curled up beside her, using the kitchen table as her altar of memory. She never sent them. Maybe she didn't have the address, maybe she was too afraid he'd forgotten, or maybe she hoped one day he'd find them on his own. Then came the one that crushed him completely. It was sealed with a pressed flower. Calla's 5th birthday. She asked me today if daddies come back if they get lost. I said, only the good ones do. Ellis closed his eyes, his soul felt blistered. I lied, the letter continued. I don't think you were bad, Ellis. I just think you were taken from us too soon, in a way we both didn't understand. The lies he'd believed for years, Celine leaving him, betraying him, erasing him, dissolved with every stroke of her pen. The truth was always here, folded neatly in a purse no one ever looked inside. The weight of guilt hit him like an avalanche. He had hated her for so long, but she had loved him quietly, faithfully, without needing to be seen. He clutched the last letter, written just months ago. The ink looked shakier, like her hands had begun to fail her. Calla asked me what I wanted for my birthday. I told her a home. Miracle. She brought me a dandelion and said, "Blow, Mommy, Daddy will come." That's when Calla peeked into the room again. She stood by the door, her little face pressed into the frame. "Why are you crying?" she whispered. Ellis turned to her, his eyes glassy. "Because I think I've been looking for you longer than you've been alive." She tilted her head, not quite understanding, but stepping closer. "She wrote about you," he said gently. "Every year, every moment, like her heart didn't know how to forget." Calla's eyes flicked to the stack of papers in his hand. "Those are Mommy's?" "Yes," he whispered, kneeling to her level. "They were meant for me, but they were also for you." Calla reached for one but stopped. "Can you read me one?" she asked softly. Ellis nodded and unfolded the letter with the pressed flower. As he read, her little fingers curled around his sleeve, grounding him in the moment. Her eyes shimmered with something beyond her years, an ache children shouldn't carry. He paused midway and asked, "Do you want to hear more?" Calla nodded. "If it's about Mommy, I want to hear everything." They sat on the cold hospital floor together, a strange place for a family to begin again. But as he read those lost words aloud to the daughter he never knew he had, and to the woman still fighting for life in the bed behind him, Ellis felt something inside him begin to mend. Love wasn't gone. It had just been waiting to be found. Calla looked up at him as she held her mother's hand, her small fingers trembling as if trying to will Celine back to life with sheer love. "Mommy," she whispered again, voice cracking like glass under pressure. "Please wake up. I found someone nice. I think you'd like him." Her eyes flicked to Ellis in the doorway, unsure whether she should smile or cry. "He doesn't yell like Mr. Hargrove. He gave me soup," she added softly, as though soup equaled sainthood. Ellis stayed still, the frame of the door anchoring him like a man not ready to step through into something fragile. The nurse beside him adjusted Aline's IV and murmured, "She's been calling for him, not you, not a doctor. Him. Daddy," over and over. Ellis clenched his jaw, blinking hard. That word, a word he thought he'd never own. He turned his face to the window, watching the darkness press against the glass like a secret long kept. Inside him, a quiet war raged, between belief and denial, past and present, guilt and a desperate, aching hope. He stepped away, his footsteps nearly silent on the sterile floor, but his heart was loud, louder than it had been in years. He found the doctor at the nurse's station, flipping through a chart. "I need a DNA test," Ellis said without hesitation, "for me and Calla." The doctor raised an eyebrow. "Are you her guardian?" "No," Ellis admitted. "I might be her father." There was a silence, weighted and clinical. "I can't promise answers," the doctor finally said, flipping a page, "and we try not to raise false hope." "I'm not here for hope," Ellis said quietly. "Just truth." The doctor nodded. "I'll order the test." Later, he sat alone on the corridor bench, knees apart, elbows resting on his thighs, as if bracing for a storm that was already halfway inside him. In one hand, he held Kala's bunny, its fabric matted, one ear barely hanging. In the other, one of Celine's unsent letters, folded so many times it seemed to have veins. His thumbs traced the crease down its center. "My darling," it began, in handwriting that shook with tenderness. "If this ever reaches you, I hope your life has been kind." He folded it again. It hurt too much. Across the hall, Kala lay curled beside her mother, her head rising and falling with Celine's weak breaths. Ellis had never seen anything so beautiful, or so terrifying. They looked like parts of a story he'd walked out on before the ending. He leaned his head back against the wall and whispered to no one, "How could I have missed this?" Every fiber of him ached, not in guilt, not just in regret, but in the sudden weight of found meaning. He hadn't lost a daughter. He'd never known he had one. He wondered what her first words were, her favorite song. If she liked thunderstorms, or was scared of them. If she knew how to swim. What she dreamed about when she wasn't worrying about saving someone else's life. He pressed the bunny to his face for a second, breathing in the scent of childhood. It smelled like dust and crayons and maybe hope. "Ellis?" Kala's voice was soft. He opened his eyes. She had tiptoed out of the room. "Are you sad?" she asked, her eyes wide in the pale hallway light. He gave her a half smile. "A little." "Why?" He looked at her, really looked. Those eyes, the same blue he'd seen in the mirror all his life. "Because I think I missed a lot of birthdays." She tilted her head. "You can come to the next one." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I'd like that." She sat beside him, holding the bunny between them. "She calls you Daddy when she dreams," Kala said again, almost shyly. "I know. Do you think you are?" He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a folded paper, the DNA consent form. "I'm finding out. Do you want to be?" He met her gaze, everything in him answering before his mouth could. "Yes," he said, barely more than a whisper. She smiled, small and unsure, but warm like sunrise. "Then maybe you already are." That undid him. He turned away for a moment, not wanting her to see the tears he couldn't stop. She leaned her head against his arm. "You're warm," she murmured. "Not like the streets." He placed his hand gently on top of hers. "You should have never had to know those streets," he whispered. "But I did," she said. "And then, I found you." He closed his eyes. Her words weren't meant to pierce, but they did. He thought of every night he'd driven past alleys without looking. Every minute he'd wasted chasing success while she slept on benches. "How did you find me?" he asked. She shrugged. "I didn't. I was just selling flowers. And you found me." He turned to her. "I think I was always meant to." A nurse walked by, her shoes squeaking faintly. Ellis stood and reached for Kala's hand. "Let's sit with your mommy again." She nodded and followed, her small fingers wrapped in his, trusting. As they stepped into the room, Celine stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering. Ellis stepped close. "Celine, it's me." Her lips parted, dry and cracked, but she smiled faintly. "Ellis? I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Kala squeezed her mom's hand. "I told you," she whispered. "I found someone." Celine's gaze flicked between them, and in that fragile moment, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. He bent down, touching her forehead gently. "I should have found you sooner," he said. Celine's hand weakly reached for his. "You did. Just in time." And for the first time in years, Ellis Thorne felt whole, not because he had all the answers, but because he finally asked the right questions. The moment Kala's lips softly whispered "Daddy" in her sleep, Ellis felt the dam inside him collapse, not the kind of cry that came with sound, but the kind that hollowed your chest and made you feel both destroyed and alive all at once. He covered his mouth, afraid the trembling would wake her. The letter confirming she was his daughter lay on the cold tile beside him, but her small hand wrapped around his finger was the real proof, warm, trusting, unknowingly sacred. He sat frozen, afraid to move, as if breaking contact with her would shatter the entire universe. His thumb gently stroked the back of her hand, memorizing the tiny lines like a map he should have followed years ago. He looked up at Celine, pale and silent, her chest rising just enough to remind him that time hadn't run out. Yet. "Why didn't I look for you harder?" he whispered toward her stillness. The machines answered with beeps, steady and cold. He rose and leaned over Calla, kissing her forehead. "You don't have to beg anymore, baby. I swear to you. Never again." As he stood, he carefully tucked the blanket around her shoulders, then picked up the test result again. Folding it like something sacred, he walked into the hallway, pacing, then stopped and pressed his back against the wall. Nurses walked past him like ghosts, unaware that the world had just shifted on its axis. His world had cracked open, and at the center of it was a little girl with tangled curls and a heart too big for her age. And a woman who never stopped loving him, not even through silence, not even through lies. He pulled out his phone, dialing a number he hadn't called in years. His voice was steady but low. "I need you to get the legal paperwork started. Guardianship, custody. Her name is Calla Willow. She's mine." The silence on the other end was stunned. "Ellis? Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," he said. "And she's not going back to the streets. Not ever." Hanging up, he walked back inside, each step feeling like penance, like purpose. He sat beside Celine now, unable to stop staring at her. Her eyelashes fluttered once, then stilled. Her body was so still it scared him. He took her hand, so fragile and cold. "I missed every birthday, every scraped knee, every first word, but I won't miss another moment." A nurse gently tapped the doorframe. "Visiting hours end soon," she said softly. Ellis didn't move. "I'm not visiting," he said. "I'm staying." The nurse gave a small nod, sensing this wasn't a night for rules. He turned to the window. Rain had started falling, soft and slow, like the world outside was mourning something too. He watched the droplets race each other down the glass, each one a second lost, each one a second he would fight to reclaim. Calla stirred in her cot again. Ellis moved to her side instantly, brushing a lock of hair from her cheek. "I'm here, sweetheart," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." She blinked awake for just a moment, her blue eyes foggy with sleep. "Did Mommy wake up yet?" she asked. His throat tightened. "Not yet, baby. But soon. She's strong, like you." "I told her about you," she whispered. "Every night." He swallowed hard. "I wish I'd known. I would have come sooner." "It's okay," she said, already drifting again. "You're here now." And that simple sentence gutted him, because it was all she ever wanted. Someone to stay, someone to choose her, not by accident, but on purpose. Ellis sat back down, burying his face in his hands. The guilt clawed at him. How many times had he walked past little girls on streets and never wondered? How many times had he trusted lies instead of his heart? He remembered the day Celine vanished. The pain. The betrayal. Or so he thought. But now, it all seemed like a cruel orchestration. She hadn't run away, she'd been erased. Erased from his life, from their future, and from the family they never got to build. But fate, in its mysterious cruelty and grace, had given them back to him, and he wouldn't waste another breath. He opened Celine's old letter again, the one he'd been carrying since the night before. "My darling," it began, in shaky, graceful ink. "I hope someday you see her eyes, and know they came from love, not mistake." He choked on his breath. She had never stopped believing in the family they once dreamed of. She held on to that dream through pain, through poverty, through sickness. "You gave me a reason to survive," the letter ended, "and now she gives me a reason to fight." He set the letter on the nightstand beside her. "Then fight, Celine," he said aloud. "Come back. Let her see you smile again." The machines kept whispering, indifferent, but Ellis refused to give up. He gently placed Calla's bunny between Celine's arms. "She carries this everywhere. Maybe you'll feel her strength through it." He took a breath and looked at the test result again. "Father, Ellis Thorne. Probability, 99.999%. The numbers blurred the rough tears. That missing piece inside him, Calla had been it all along, and now, no matter what, he would be her shield, her voice, her home. He bent over and kissed her tiny knuckles. She had once feared Ellis might never know Calla, but now, he held her like he always had. They walked down the hospital steps together, one step, then another, as a family no longer fractured. Reporters had gathered by the gates, having heard whispers of the mysterious CEO and the girl who once begged on the street. One shouted, "Sir, is it true? Is she your daughter?" Ellis paused, looked down at Calla, then smiled. "She's my reason," he said. "Not just my daughter, my second chance." Cameras flashed, but Calla clung to him, hiding her face in his chest. "I don't like loud lights," she mumbled. Ellis laughed gently. "Then let's go where it's quiet. Somewhere only we know." They drove to a small field where wildflowers bloomed, yellow and pink, just like the colors Calla once wore. Celine sat on a blanket while Ellis and Calla picked flowers together. "This one's for Mommy," Calla said, handing him a daisy. "And this one," she added, "is for you, 'cause Mommy said daisies forgive." Ellis pressed the flower to his heart. "Then I'll plant every daisy I can find." Later that evening, under a sky dusted with stars, they lit a lantern together. Inside it, Ellis placed the final letter Celine had written, the one she never got to send. "Goodbye to the past," he whispered. "And hello to everything we still have." The lantern floated upward, golden and silent, a symbol of love that had waited but never died. Celine leaned into him, Calla curled between them, her bunny in one hand, her future in the other. For the first time in years, the night didn't feel lonely, it felt like home.